Hiring sucks. It sucks for the company. It sucks for the candidates. It sucks for the AI note takers who are forced to generate useful bullet points from the inane interviews that take place in almost every corner of corporate America. Sally and Jethro discussed the importance of the company's Third Thursday pizza parties and agreed that pineapple is actually an acceptable topping. Who you bring into your organization affects everything, from culture to competitiveness to the quality of the jokes on your Slack channels. But we often treat hiring like a chore or an afterthought. What if we made it a strategic priority and stripped all the suck out of the experience? That's Everett Reiss's mission. He co-founded Jane HR to create a more human approach to hiring. Sounds pretty cool to me. They create detailed, ideal candidate profiles so you actually know who you're looking for instead of just relying on vibes. They design job descriptions that are actually relevant to the person reading it, not just the legal compliance team. They use technology to improve human connection, not replace it. And they align incentives with actual hiring needs, so companies aren't wasting everyone's time creating BS ghost jobs that fill up around half of most job listing sites. We also talked about ways candidates can make their own experiences less tortuous, like prioritizing applications where you have first or second degree connections and focusing on relationship building, coffees, lunches, Zoom chats, versus stabbing every apply button you see on LinkedIn or Indeed. There was no stabbing during this conversation, just a fun chat with a guy who's putting great work into the world. If you enjoy this episode, please like, share, rate, review, or subscribe to the podcast. Let the desuckifying begin. Here's Everett. Okay, Everett Reiss, welcome to the Desuckify Work podcast.
Hey, thanks, TJ. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. We're going to get into some stuff here that I think I haven't touched on a ton on this show before, the hiring side of work. And yet I think it's one of the major contributors to why work can suck sometimes if we get it wrong. So I'm excited to dig into that. So before we do, can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing work-wise and how you came to be doing it?
Yeah, sure. It's hard to accept the fact that I guess I've been at this or kind of in the industry for 20 years or so now, to date myself. And I got into the staffing and recruiting industry actually more on the technology system side. So was kind of at a technology company, kind of worked my way up from, your frontline support to systems implementations and consulting work, where we were implementing these, it's going to sound real exciting, these ERP, enterprise resource planning systems for multi-branch staffing firms throughout the world, or sorry, throughout the country. We focus on the United States. Mm-hmm. So while it sounds boring, it was actually a pretty good way to get exposure to like the full side of recruiting businesses, staffing businesses, what high volume looks like, but more bespoke executive search looks like. And we were really powering everything from the applicant tracking side to the CRM side to payroll, billing, accounting. So now I know enough about accounting to be semi-dangerous. From there, actually coming out of the Great Recession, obviously it's one of those events that it always feels like maybe every 10 years, 12 years, right? Something happens where everybody has to take stock of things. The box gets shaken. So my world was obviously like talking to the staffing agencies themselves, but just through a few different means, I ended up networking more with business owners, department heads, HR leaders, really what the staffing industry we would call the staffing buyers, essentially. So the people buying staffing services, the employers themselves. And through those conversations, I was kind of like, my eyes were open to just how frustrated I think people were with the status quo of hiring, how from their perception, hiring was broken, how in many ways traditional staffing models don't actually address those issues, which through those conversations, through multiple iterations, eventually ended up launching my own company that I co-founded called Jane HR. And through that, we're very much focused on giving companies, a more embedded model. So we're kind of operating more as an extension of the team. So we're giving kind of companies the process itself that's going to yield better outcomes, while at the same time having the resources that can roll up their sleeves and still do like the hard work, the heavy lifting that is recruiting. Somebody has to do that. Yep. To kind of give a holistic solution there where we're all aligned on better hires, better outcomes, better experiences for everybody involved. So that's kind of 20 years in a nutshell. So
Nice. That's excellent. I hear you on some of the frustrations folks have had with the hiring process over the years, whether you're working with certain staffing companies or you're trying to do it yourself. There's lots of frustrations either side. And I'm curious for you. You have this interesting career path and you've worked with a lot of folks in this world of staffing and hiring. And like, what's been your work experience? Meaning, have you enjoyed it? And how are you feeling about the current thing that you're building? And I guess on a bigger level, what role is work playing for you in your life?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So in many respects, actually, as you were kind of doing the intros, make me think of something I talk about a lot, which is that hiring essentially is like the tip of the spear when it comes to work. In one sense, sales is like the tip of the spear when it comes to revenue generation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
sales and marketing. Hiring is the tip of the spear when it comes to work, because not aligned well, if that's not calibrated well, then you just have so many downstream issues, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sort of like our internal mantras, which we try to do both for our clients and also like for ourselves, is to make work, which is kind of like a simple. And so we believe that, hey, if we can treat hiring thoughtfully, treat people well, really just prioritize that and make sure that's well calibrated and do that with excellence. That's not the only aspect to making work, but if we can do that, then we're going to like optimize the chances of that actually happening through the full life cycle of people's experiences at an organization. So that's kind of how I think about it.
Yeah.
I kind of like maybe I'm a bit of a masochist, but sometimes like the more complex, the more like stakeholders are involved, like the more gnarly like certain problems are, the more interesting, and the more in maybe a sick kind of way, the more fun it can actually be. So
Yeah.
So there's a level of dysfunction that I actually enjoy to enter into to then try to help make sense of and unravel.
Yeah.
And obviously there's a level of dysfunction that's like, we're like, okay, this is unsolvable. But more times than not, like, I feel like we can obviously, like, when we're choosing to work with folks, like we can kind of vet that stuff out as best as possible and ensure that we're all aligned on the mission.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting as you describe your personal sort of experience and connection to work. It reminds me a bit of a tool I use with some of my coaching clients. It's about finding your why. And there's 9 possible whys, and one of them is what's called make sense. And you use that term, like, I like to get in there, it's a gnarly problem, and try to make sense of it. So I wonder if that would actually possibly be your result. It's my result. I get it. I connect to that idea that if you give me just a pristine, no wrinkle, no wave body of water, I don't want it. But if you tell me it's going to have a little something to it and I can help calm it and bring something to it, that's interesting. That's what I'm hearing from you. I mean,
yeah,
it almost would be boring if it was just smooth sailing.
Yeah, no, 100%. My dad, he sails, so you need,
nice.
Guess what? There's the doldrums, and there's, we went on for Father's Day, not this past year, maybe the previous year, we went up the Hudson River took the boat up the Hudson River to Kingston, and it's a small sailboat, small motor. So we putter, there's no wind. So we puttered literally like 8 hours, 20 miles with this because there's no wind. It wasn't.
Yeah.
Need a little more action.
Yeah. I like that. I'm glad my metaphor actually connected. Yeah. The Hudson River, you're reminding me of how beautiful that is as you move up. I used to live on the East Coast, going up the Hudson.
Yeah, no, I'm fortunate in that. I mean, I don't live there anymore. I'm outside of Philadelphia, but growing up in that area and being able to still visit my parents up there, and it's beautiful.
Yeah. So you have kind of a unique view of the world of work. You connect with a lot of different companies. Do you have a read on the state of work? You said you want to help make work.
Yeah.
I always describe it as if there was a suck meter and it's either off the charts or actually like really great and wonderful, where does it seem to fall right now?
Yeah. So, and again, my prism is always, my prism being in talent acquisition, the core thing that I'm always dealing with is the hiring space, right? So it's not like, and I get exposed, obviously there's downstream things like compensation, employee engagement, stuff that I'm like exposed to, right? But my depth of knowledge is always on that front end of the piece. Of course, hiring itself, I think it kind of skews things in one sense because a few things. One is like, and I think well, I'll call it not the history of the world, but like, let's say modern work history.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know, is there a period in time where anybody ever enjoyed like looking for a job? Really? Did anybody ever really enjoy, like, was that ever anybody's like favorite
I have a
thing?
hard time believing it. I mean, I think you might have some excitement around the thought of getting a job.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
process always feels kind of like, I remember like looking for an apartment in New York. Like, I'm excited about the prospect of having an apartment, but the process is just horrifying.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think it's gotten any better.
Probably not. Yeah.
But and then of course, like, has anybody from hiring managers, whoever, like, has anybody ever really enjoyed hiring? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's like you're hiring because of, in any case, I mean, you could be hiring for a few different reasons. One is you're in a really crap, I just lost like a great person and now we have to backfill, which is like the least fun situation. You can be hiring for growth reasons, right? So it's exciting because you're hiring for growth reasons, but you're also overwhelmed. Hey, there's more work for us to do. We needed somebody in yesterday. So there's always like, and then the other challenge with hiring it, from an employer perspective is most of the people that are doing the hiring and the decision makers, they're not doing it all the time, right? Like, some people it's like, oh, I hire once a year or every 2 years. Other people, maybe they're kind of continuously hiring, but it's not like their core job responsibility itself. So, so for all that, like, I do feel, I mean, this sounds, and maybe this says more about me, but I always feel like I always have a higher sense of tension because I think hiring is stressful. So I'm really like prefacing this whole, working my way up to answering this question. At the current moment, a few things. I do think actually the hiring experience, I think there is a heightened level of frustration and tension within the hiring space. I think, and I do think the process itself and people's experience of it on both sides has degraded and become a little bit more dehumanized. And I can talk a little bit more about that. I think that, and then I also think obviously there's also, so there's, we could talk about the technology side of things. We can talk about the practices. We can talk about also just like the current like market itself, right?
Yeah.
Where I think there's a stiffness to the market. So like, it's kind of weird. I feel like there's like the vanity metrics of unemployment is low, right? Yeah. And then it wasn't that long ago that everybody was like, man, I think the job numbers are going to be down. And then, oh my gosh, the job numbers are not down. They're actually higher than we thought, right? So you have these kind of like high level macro metrics that can make everybody, you're like, okay, this is great. And then, so there's like that. And then there's this like split screen experience of people just having a really, like people that are looking for jobs, having a really hard time getting another job. You have hiring pipelines ballooning. Like it's not hard to be 1,000 to 2,000 candidates deep in just for one job. So it's definitely employers market despite the low unemployment and better than expected job numbers. I feel like there's probably like a lot of like economic indicator. I mean, I don't know, I'm not an economist, but like, I feel like there's a lot of economic indicators that probably like don't make sense now, where it's like, this shouldn't be that, like interest rates shouldn't be, and then this shouldn't bonds. And now I'm talking about things I don't know, but like,
like a lot of stuff just doesn't seem to make sense, like according to the traditional paradigms. Yeah.
So, that's just kind of like my temperature on the market. And then, sorry, the stiffness piece I was talking about is that, so you have these good numbers, but there's a stiffness in terms, like a lack of fluidity. Like people, I don't think people that have jobs they're not like making those moves. And then employers are just less, I mean, there are some layoffs that are happening, but the ones that aren't, they're not necessarily like hiring as aggressively and falling all over each other like they were 2 or 3 years ago, just to hire somebody. So there's like I'm just using the term like a stiffness to the market.
Yeah, you can feel that. I mean, I think, especially in contrast to what happened in those kind of early COVID times when the market just switched on and it was just this raging spigot of just stuff, like jobs everywhere, people jumping. And it was surprising at the time because we thought COVID was going to kind of shut down the market, and it kind of did for a short period, but then it was so open. And then now, I mean, I don't know historically if it's a terrible job market, but it certainly, from a anecdotal standpoint and a storytelling standpoint, it feels terrible. Everyone I know who's looking, I think, is feeling that stiffness. It feels like everybody is,
which leads to inaction too. Like there can be a lot of like activity, like a lot of people applying to jobs, even people like posting jobs. Obviously, there's we can talk about the ghost jobs phenomenon too, which is all fake stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of fakeness, a lot of pretense. But when people are anxious and there's a heightened level of uncertainty, right? Both for people that have jobs, for employers themselves, right? Like your reaction is to kind of just like hold steady. I mean, that's what everybody's doing. It's probably like they're holding their cards,
Yeah, no, it definitely seems that way. And certainly people I talk to, it's like because of some of the economic stuff, the uncertainty, the political climate, there's some rigidity around that. There is the sense that the numbers don't maybe make sense. Unemployment's down, but there's other indicators that aren't great. And so there's not an easy way to read the tea leaves, where I think maybe at one point there had been, where it's like, okay, unemployment's down and any other indicator that matters is where it should be. Therefore, let's hire. Everything seems so just upside down that I think people go, I don't understand it, so therefore I can't move. And I'm curious for you and your company, how does that affect you? And can you, on a more micro level, can you impact that as sort of an expert in the field and help people really gauge whether hiring makes sense for them?
Yeah. So, I guess a few things to that end. Actually, one thing I just wanted to say more, just kind of putting a bow on the rigidity and stiffness, and just some feedback for anybody that's maybe thinking about making a move is, if you're like a mid-level to senior level professional, right? Where it's like, hey, like my next move, I want to move, I want it to be just as good, if not better than where I'm currently at. Right. So you have like a mid to high baseline, right?
Yeah.
Like you do really need to give yourself like 12 to 18 months, it feels like right now to have the runway and to feel like you're not going to be forced into a situation where you're settling for something.
Wow.
I do think, if you're like toying with the idea of should I be looking for something else or not, I think it's good to at least be having conversations, doing things that are some momentum towards that, because like by the time you get to a point of like, oh man, I really need to make a move, maybe financially, or just like, my boss is killing me, I'm tearing my hair out with this client, whatever. Yeah. Like you don't want to be in a situation where you're going to make a move and have to settle, and you really need to give yourself a long runway in that process right now.
Which I appreciate that insight. I can imagine a lot of folks are kind of crying inside hearing that timeline, because 12 to 18 months, it's like, oh gosh, especially knowing when it's been a lot shorter than that. But I appreciate that, because I think everybody who's in the job market knows that once you get in it, you're like, oh, it's going to take a while for any kind of traction, and traction doesn't necessarily equal job. It just means you might have several good runs with people and you still don't land the job. So therefore,
and I think it doesn't, and I think it's important for people to think about their jobs search, or even just like exploring other opportunities in less of an application sort of manner. Yeah, I mean, obviously, once you're serious about really pursuing another job, you're going to have to apply. You're going to have to like swim in that stream.
Yeah.
But I think a more important KPI is literally just like coffees, virtual coffees, in-person coffees, conversations like this. The more of those things that you're doing, like that's almost like the most important KPI, because through that human network, you're going to optimize your chances of getting eyes when it comes time to apply, when it comes time to throw your hat into a ring. Like you'll get eyes on it, or you'll also just get this you have a conversation. Oh, hey, you should talk to this person. All these like things that you can't really put a value on, other than just, I would say, treat virtual coffees, in-person coffees, lunches, all that sort of stuff, almost as your KPI for your next career move.
That makes sense. Okay, so with your company, how are you helping both sides? So let's start maybe on the company side, who is feeling the rigidity of the market.
Yeah.
And how can you help them assess it more accurately for them specifically, and how to move or not move?
Yeah, 100%. I feel like, with hiring, depending on your, religious tradition, the good stuff, or the or sin itself comes at conception in terms of like how a role is conceived, right? Yes, at some point somebody is like, I need to hire, right? And then there's a bunch of informal stuff that happens after that, and then eventually it sort of at least materializes in the form of a job description that either goes through some rigorous creation process, some bureaucratic creation process, some ChatGPT process, or some copying and pasting process, or some
combination of
magical mix of all that stuff, right? So for us, the key thing initially is really helping folks nail down the ideal candidate profile. Obviously, like I don't show up in somebody's shower when they first realize that they need to hire.
A weird service to offer.
Yeah. Oh, hello. But, and then obviously when we're having a conversation, the people that are talking to us are sort of a self-selected group of people that are very serious about obviously hiring, right? But for us, it's really kind of like in the kickoff and onboarding, really even in the sales process, we'll be getting pretty in depth into the discovery around why they need to hire, what's the broader context, what are they trying to accomplish? And then once we're really starting to work together, one of the key things is really like formulating that ideal candidate profile, because everything really flows from there, right? Like, okay, the idea, and sometimes there could be like 2 or 3 personas, right? It also sometimes, is this the first time they're hiring for this role? So there's an increased level of ambiguity, which means maybe a little bit more testing early on, a little bit more calibration, or is there a track record for success in this role? So there's more information that we're working off of based on the previous folks or that have been in that position, or folks that are already there in that position. Maybe it's like a higher volume, a higher headcount number of folks in that type of role where they, so those are all things that we want to kind of like feed into the ideal candidate profile, which then helps us then set up the whole, it just defines everything, right? Like everything from who we're trying to appeal to as we're writing their job description and job ed, what pushes and pulls do we want to press into in the messaging as we're sourcing folks? And then what are the key competencies that should really be getting assessed as we're talking to them in the initial interviews, as their interview teams are talking to the candidate? Like, because we're doing more and more of equipping interview teams as well with the competencies, questions they can ask. We're helping ideate and create work sample exercises, all sorts of like little things that can get dropped into the process, all increase the level of like predictability of that process, right? But that really all flows back to that conception of the role itself, if that makes any sense.
It does make sense. And couple things. One, just the concept of an ideal candidate profile. I'm sitting here going, okay, I've hired a lot of people in my work life, and I don't know that I ever had that. I mean, obviously you have a picture in your head of like who would or could fill this role, but rarely to the level of like personas and really drilling down, which probably also explains why, in my experience, almost every job description I've ever been connected to or seen is just awful. I mean, it's just because it's this, like you said, this magical combination of cutting and pasting and ChatGPT and whatever else, that it just feels like gobbledygook. It just doesn't really feel like it says anything. So how do you actually, like, what does a good job description actually look like? Because I'm not sure I've ever seen one.
Yeah. That's a great question. Yeah, let's go exploring together. Let's see if we can find it together. So I think, there's a few elements, right? So first, actually, you know what? I think people sometimes feel like, because there's 2 different things, right? In one sense, there's like an ADA compliance driven job description, right?
Yeah.
Now, some companies that have like an HR team or whatever, they just take that and they post that, right? And in that job, let's say they're looking for their next podcast host, and they'll be like, and that type of job would include things like should be able to sit in their chair and have finger dexterity to type on their, whatever. Like, it just has these ridiculous things in there because it has to because of compliance and so forth. But that doesn't actually need to be the thing that gets posted, right? Like, so I think one thing is companies sometimes confuse, they confuse, or they're lazy, whatever the reason, they just post that thing when they really don't need to do that. I mean, they want to, hey, if you need to have that sort of like level of detail and compliance, like, yeah, you can show that to candidates once they like, get into the interview process, say, hey, oh, just, here's like the full job description, whatever.
Yeah.
But so there's that. There's also like a lot of job descriptions are too long. So for me, like, I think brevity is key. If it could just be like the equivalent of one page or the equivalent, working with clients, right? There is like decision by committee and you're like, well, this person's not gonna be happy if we take this out and this person, so there's like, okay, well, let's just get this down to like 2 pages or something. Some level of brevity. The other piece is like, I just think once you have the personas, you kind of know who you're writing to, right? Yeah. So a job description that's written for somebody, like an actual human.
Yeah.
So then you can kind of like be talking to somebody, be introducing the company to somebody and kind of like highlighting the things that are most relevant to them. Yeah. At the end of the day, rarely, we've done some pieces where we've done like interviews of the hiring manager or the CEO announcing the launch of the job, which creates a really nice,
that's interesting,
personal connection with, it gives a little bit, and then we link to the job description itself. Now the job description is written, I think it's a good quality job description that if somebody's looking at, they're like, oh, this is attractive to the right person. And this is also accurate. Like I actually like have a sense of like what
it's actually going to be
doing in the job. But, so those are kind of like just the elements that can go into, a good job description.
Yeah, and I like it. I like brevity. I definitely like, because most are definitely too long. I love the idea of an announcement from the hiring manager or the CEO. I think that's really cool and different. The distinction you're creating for me is that actually there's almost, from a company perspective, there's 3 job descriptions you probably want. There's the one you're talking about, which is like the marketing one, the one that is, customer facing and wants to connect to the personas of the people we're trying to attract. So you're writing for that person. There's that compliance version, which you need to have for all the legal reasons and regulatory reasons. And then there's probably another internal version that says, hey, it's your first day on the job. Here's what we're expecting of you. And it's probably closer to the marketing one, but it might just have like a little more meat on the bone. And it might like give you some markers around like, how do I contribute to this? How do I learn this and all that stuff? So it's interesting because I think one gets sometimes just cut and paste into all.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Not serving the right audience. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I like the way you kind of frame that out into those 3 things. And I think maybe the other thing is like, just kind of like a check is like, is this useful? Like, is this going to be the last time we ever look at this? Or is this going to actually be something we can like, at us and whoever gets hired for the job can actually build of?
Yeah. Yeah. I think 99.9% of the time in my experience, that thing is filed away either literally or on the, in the cloud somewhere, and you never really touch it again because you just start working. But
the other thing actually this conversation made me think about is there's this book called Beyond Empowerment that I read recently.
Okay.
It's I learned about it. I'm trying to remember the podcast that, Free Think put this like future of work interview out. And they were talking, and it's funny, in this future of work video, like where things are heading, they were talking to this professor, and then he was talking about this tomato company, this company that like, I think they can tomatoes or something like that. And, which doesn't seem like it's from the future, but I guess like, I forget if it's 15, 20 years ago, they really introduced this true radically like flat organizational model. Something that was actually remember when Zappos went to the holacracy thing, and then I think they they quietly like dismantled holacracy.
Became back to a more natural hierarchy.
Yeah, I feel like they should have studied the tomato company because it feels like they have their act together in this whole area of how to run a flat organization. So one of the really interesting things is they don't. So what happens is when you get a job there, it's not about your job description. It's about, so you start there and you don't have a clue, which is a colleague letter of understanding. So you work on your clue, your colleague letter of understanding, which means you're going to work with all the different people you're going to be interacting with. So it's like a highly relational outlook. And it's all about, what is my understanding? Like what can, I'm going to talk to these people so I can understand what they need of me, what they're going to be expecting of me. And then I'm going to also talk with them and formulate this so that I can define what I'm expecting from them, essentially. So everybody has clues, essentially. And that's actually really everybody's job descriptions or the closest thing that the organization has to a job description. And it runs in this incredibly flat structure, which is very interesting too, because it's not like it's like some like cool dev shop of like,
Right.
like we're talking about people of like, frontline workers, manufacturing, supervisors.
Yeah. Complex.
So anyway,
That's interesting.
yeah. So something like, I mean, it's one of those things where, it's not like, oh, we're going to like toy around with like, it's a radical organizational shift.
Well, as you say it, it makes me I'm starting to connect the dots that in ways that I don't think we always do with hiring, which is you mentioned it being sort of the tip of the spear, but I think we often treat it more like a gate and that is separate from the organization. So there's the gate you get through and now you get to walk through the main doors.
Yeah.
And therefore there's very little relation between the hiring process and the organizational ethos. But when I hear about a company like that, what I wonder, and I wonder this for any structure, but how different hiring must be or should be given how you run your company and how it should be sort of maybe a preview of what you're going to experience, and that you should be starting to, slowly entering into that world through the hiring process. And so there needs to be alignment. It doesn't often feel like that, but is that part of the work you do to help people connect the dots between how the organizations run and how they hire?
Yeah. I mean, it's really important. Yeah. So in designing out a hiring process, and it kind of can depend on how embedded we can be and how, depending on the engagement. For us, we prefer to be as much a part of the team as possible, because then that actually enables us to like represent the organization and calibrate everything and suggest things and design things in a way that are like that are incredibly cohesive with how the organization operates, to give people an actual like simulation or real sense of like, okay, this is what this organization is actually like. So yeah, in the hiring process design piece of things, like that's really important. And you have to be really thoughtful about, like, so for instance, it's funny, like I've worked in so many different, supported so many different types of sectors, right? Like from like I think the country's like biggest importer of cocoa beans, right? to like some high tech startup that's like sending satellite sensors to space. So it's like been like a pretty broad gamut, but now like a lot of the orgs that we work with are an interesting mix of either education, nonprofit, government, or technology. But so one of the education clients we were recently working with, it's tough because, so on the one hand, you're bringing in a new leader, and it's so the board is really responsible for the decision, and the search committee is running this, is the key decision makers, right? Yeah. But now at the end of the day, and this person is going to have to engage effectively with this board, right? But how much of this person's workday is spent with the board? Like, I don't know, 5%. So in that process, we had to really carefully work with them to design what in-person, what having them come to the school would look like, and actually be able to meet with the students and the teachers and all the other stakeholders. Yeah. To kind of just, be very thoughtful about what that looked like, to give the person a real sense of like the community itself and so forth. But then you also have to be careful because you don't want to, because there's like decision-making stakeholders. There's other like kind of like stakeholders that are involved in the interview process, whose input, they're kind of gatekeepers too. And then there's like stakeholders you want to kind of see how somebody interacts with, but at the end of the day, they're not decision makers, or they're not close to it. So you have to be careful how you structure these processes so that none of the stakeholders involved get ideas in their head that they have that everybody knows what their role is in the process. And that, because I have seen certain stakeholders get introduced too early, and then certain people start to almost like torpedo things in ways where, you kind of almost have to design against that to some extent. So all these things are like nuanced and just take a lot of thought in how to properly structure them, depending on like the role, the job level, the organization, and all the context surrounding it. Well,
I mean, personally, I just appreciate hearing that there's some thought being put into this process, because it often can feel like it's not taken as seriously as it should be. And I would say that from both the side of going out there and trying to get jobs in the past, and also from a hiring perspective, sometimes maybe not being as rigorous or thoughtful or understanding all of those nuances as well as I could have at the time. And I think to your point earlier, nobody really likes the hiring process, at least as most of us have currently experienced it. And I think it's partially because of some of the stuff you alluded to earlier, like the ghost job phenomenon. Like you go on LinkedIn or Indeed, and a lot of those jobs are garbage. Like what's going on with that? What is that about?
Yeah, it's I guess it's a phenomenon that is less than 10 years old. I think to quantify it, a helpful place to start would be, so in 2018, I think the numbers are that 80% of publicly posted jobs would result in a hire. Right now, fast forward, the last numbers I saw is that that's gotten cut in half, and actually 40% of publicly posted jobs, or maybe being charitable, it's closer to half of publicly posted jobs are actually resulting in hires. And if I'm also going to be charitable about the definition of a ghost job, I would say it's a job with low hiring intent. Or if I want to be less charitable, I would just say it's a fake job or a BS job. Now, of course, again, in 2018, 20% of publicly posted jobs weren't resulting in hires, which is understandable. Like sometimes you can post a job with the best of intent, things change, you lose a contract, whatever. You're like, oh, we don't need to hire anymore. But that situation is not accounting for such a dramatic shift. I think there's a lot of different dynamics. I think we have, and this is where I think being thoughtful is important, right? Mm-hmm. It's easy to zombie walk our way into certain practices and situations. And I don't think we've thought through what it actually, as technology's changed, as the cost of posting a job has become almost zero through a bunch of different technology innovations or innovations that have been there, but that have gone mainstream. Example would be applicant tracking systems. Like every applicant tracking system, ATS, is a thing that everybody pretty much knows or have experienced some level because they've had to apply into the system, the corporate hiring system. But those have gone so down in the last 15 years or so. They've gone so down market that everybody can have an applicant tracking system. And usually when you have an applicant tracking system, those jobs get syndicated, right? The jobs get syndicated. So I post a job within my ATS, and that job can get syndicated to LinkedIn and Indeed and Glassdoor, and then all these strange spammy looking sites that you're like, how did that job get out there? So it's never been easier to both post a job and distribute a job very, very broadly for a very low cost, or in many cases for nothing, which in one sense you can say, oh, well, that's great. Hey, so that means, and then now obviously you can add AI to the mix, and if we wanted to, we could spend the next 2 minutes brainstorming a quick position, generating a description, and I could go into my ATS and we could post it, and we could have it very widely distributed. We could test the market. We could say, hey, how are people reacting to this? And this is great. We get to test the market super easily, see, hey, we can look like we're growing. We can look like we have, hey, I can make a bunch of new connections, whatever my motivation. Hey, this is great. Well, maybe it's not great if the market's getting flooded with a ton of jobs like that. Then real candidates are spending a lot of time spinning their wheels trying to apply to jobs and not getting the market signals that they used to get, the same hit rates. So that's just, so that's kind of like a narrative of the ghost job phenomenon. I mean, another issue, a significant percentage of ghost jobs are because, or another version of a ghost job is just a job that gets filled and never taken down. Cause there's no, and it's not like, there's not like evil intent behind it, but also like if you're not getting dinged $300 to $400 to $500 a month for having that job out there, it's easy to forget about the job being out there.
Yeah. It's interesting as you describe that low cost plus, various incentives from, positive to negative in terms of the intent behind it, then create this phenomenon. And what's not clear to me is how much the employer really feels the cost of that. I mean, I think in a more employee-centric market, they might feel the cost differently because maybe they wouldn't be getting some of the best candidates because those candidates would be frustrated by like, I've seen 1,000 jobs from your company and they're all BS. And so I'm not applying to you again. But in the more desperate times that we have now, maybe this is the one I'm going to do it again. So they're not necessarily really receiving any clear signals that what they're doing.
Yeah. It's too, like there's downstream effects that employers are experiencing negative things, but it's too downstream. It is not direct enough. So like the downstream effect, and these are, again, multifaceted things. So like, if we like magically solve the ghost jobs problem, I think that would solve a lot of pain, but it wouldn't like eliminate everything. But one downstream effect of ghost jobs is a ton of being overwhelmed with resumes, because the vicious cycle is once you realize and I shouldn't even say realize, because this is a subconscious thing that happens. You're like, okay, I applied to a job, man. Okay, I'm not getting anything. I gotta apply, gotta keep updating numbers. Oh my gosh, this is so discouraging. Oh wow, there's this resume generating tool. Oh wow, this thing can mass apply to jobs for me. So like these things kind of, it's a nuanced cycle, but I think the ghost jobs leads to erosion in the trust in the market. It leads to bad feedback loops to candidates. It just increases the volume of applications, which lowers the quality of applications. And then we are at a point where employers are incredibly frustrated. Recruiters, I was talking to one company, and recruiters are just taking more and more PTO days because they're just so like overwhelmed with resumes, which is awesome. I mean, not that recruiters shouldn't take PTO days, but taking PTO days doesn't help.
Doesn't solve the problem. Yeah. No, I mean, that's real stuff. It sounds, it's really noisy is what it sounds like. You were just generating a lot of noise in the system. And so to really be able to see where the signal actually is, and therefore now you're wasting a lot of employee time sorting through noise. So you're inefficient. I'm curious on the candidate side. Is there anything, knowing this truth of the ghost jobs and all that, like, what's the best way to engage with that truth, if anything?
As a candidate.
Candidate.
I think, some of it goes back to what I was saying is your key KPI should actually, like you're going to have to apply to jobs. One is I would prioritize applying to jobs that, or at least if I'm going to be spending the time to really customize, like if I'm spending any time on a job, by spending time like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes on applying to a job, honestly, just stick to jobs that you're going to have either first or second degree connections at. Because once you're going, not to say hey, if it takes a second to apply to some great job somewhere that you're not even connected to, great, apply to it, but don't burn so much time applying to that stuff. Focus on your first and second jobs that are connected to first and second degree connections, because then you can apply, you can then message somebody internally or that is connected. Hey, like, I saw this. I was really excited about it. I did throw my hat into the ring, but I would love, but I'd love to learn a little bit more. If you'd be open to just a quick chat, that'd be great. Whatever. Yeah. That person, you may never hear anything. But there's a few things that could happen. One is they see it. There's a high chance maybe they ping like the recruiter. Hey, this person's messaged me. Can you just take a look? You may never actually see that conversation, but actually at least somebody put eyes on your resume. You may say, oh yeah, sure. Hey, let me, great. Happy to hop on a call. Or the person can get back to you, say, hey, I'm not involved in this, but I'll at least shoot me your resume. I can at least send it on. And then you're like, I applied, but I'll still send them my resume. And then it's like, in marketing and sales, right? The more touch points, the more
touch points. Yeah.
So you got to approach it from multiple angles. You have to be highly relational. It's just, there's just no, you just have to get out of, and I say get out of, like, you just can't feel like all you're doing is just swimming in the application stream. You have to live in there to some extent because you got to apply to jobs.
Eventually. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's tough because I think you can feel like you're doing a lot by just, hey, I banged out another 50 applications this week, but you're actually doing really low value work as opposed to what you're talking about. And that's the really interesting thing on some level. As much as technology is coming into play, and you mentioned AI, and I'm sure that's adding new wrinkles and layers to all of this. But ultimately, at least as we currently exist in this world, like, it's ultimately a human who's going to be working for another human. And that piece of it still matters on both sides, right? You work with the companies and you're helping them create really good experiences where people have multiple touch points in their own way of who the stakeholders are. And then from a candidate perspective, yeah, I think continuing to just activate your network and have those lunches and coffees and quick little Zoom meetings is still at the core, despite all the technology, or maybe even more so because there's so much technological noise.
Yeah. Yeah, no, 100%. And I mean, it's funny, you can read, I've seen multiple articles about this, including the Wall Street Journal, but it's kind of like the whole gist is like companies are going back to it's sort of like the referrals and relationships are the things that companies are just resorting to in the hiring process, which can be good and bad. So like there's examples of companies that, they're getting 1,000+ resumes for jobs, and then they end up getting 3 referrals, and they're like, I don't feel like I'm not going to pick through this mess, like of quality, of varying. They talk to the 3 referrals, the 1,000 applications kind of get pushed to the side, and then one of those referrals gets hired. Like that's happening all the time, and so that's why you have to be in the relationship lane. And not like there's a good thing about it, and there's also the negative thing, as we all know, like if you're just purely living in your relationships, that can be in referrals, then that can be affecting holistically the diversity of the folks that you're actually considering.
Yeah, for sure.
So, but that's just it's just one of these ironic sort of outcomes of all this technology infused hiring, is that sometimes all these technology driven created candidate pools get pushed aside for the 2 or 3 human generated referrals that come in. Yeah,
it really is interesting. And I appreciate your perspective on that, because there is a natural, I get why we do that sometimes and go through the referral thing. And there's actual benefits, as you say. It's like, well, I know this person, or I know the person, that's like, there's trust there. Oh, yeah. But obviously you might be excluding people who could be as good or better candidates because they're not in that world. So I think we have work to do in making those lanes as accessible as possible, like not having them be closed off and walled off in the way they can be naturally, because I think that's just how we can be as humans, but creating opportunities for everyone to get into the human lane, the referral lane, all of that stuff.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Yeah. So I want to start, wrapping us up here. I've asked you a fair amount of questions. I'd love to give you a chance to pose one to our audience.
Yeah, I think and I think this is kind of related to all this and beyond is, I think it's important for everybody just to think about, like, what is the world that I want to live in and want to be creating, whether it be, for myself in, tonight, tomorrow, in 5 years, or for my kids, and then the second part to that question then is, how am I actually contributing to the creation of that world? Like, and not necessarily in big ways. Like, it's just very easy to pick up little habits, little tools, little actions that could be leading us towards that, or actually just causing us to like zombie walk our way away from that. And I honestly think the ghost jobs phenomenon is a great example of that, right? Yeah. Where it's like, well, this is cool. Like, I can now just post a job so easily. And then, which can be cool, but it also can be not cool.
Yeah.
So we have agency in actually deciding, are these, at least these little areas of influence that we have, are we contributing to a cool world that I want to live in, or a less cool world that, oh crap, I don't actually want to live in?
Yeah. I love that question. I think, like you said, it's really easy to be in that kind of zombie walk state where you're just doing and you're not maybe being intentional about it, or you just haven't had a moment to be thoughtful about, what world do I want to live in? And then recognizing that, I'm not changing the whole world, but my contribution is a real contribution, and I can be a part of creating what I want. It's easy to lose sight of that when you feel all of the lack of control that so many things are throwing at us, to recognize, like, but I still can do things. I can still make an impact, and I can still influence and change things. Yeah. I love that one. So we've touched on a lot of stuff here related to work, in particular to hiring, but we've gone a little deeper. I'm curious for yourself, if you could wave a magic wand and fully desuckify the world of work, what does that world look like?
Yeah, it's getting rid of, just cutting through there's a lot of layers between us as humans, right? So it's cutting through the pretense and just trying to like facilitate those direct human to human relationships and interactions. As best as possible, and certainly hiring, we just keep throwing up a whole bunch of layers in between trying to do work as hard as possible and as unconventionally as possible to do that.
I like that. I think more people are probably feeling the need for that because of all the technology. It's like, how do we keep at the core us?
Yeah.
And how does technology serve us? Because it often ends up kind of flipping the script and suddenly we're just doing things because of the technology instead of the technology actually benefiting us. Ghost jobs, everything else. I mean, it all flows that way. So I like that world that you're envisioning. I want to have a moment of silliness here as we wrap up. You've listened to some of the shows. You've probably heard some cat meows and some other things in there. I'm a cat fanatic, so that's kind of my go-to sound effect. But I always invite the guests to contribute something. So do you have a sound or something that you'd like to add into the mix?
Yeah. Well, I do have a cat. The cat she doesn't make that much noise, actually.
Yeah, some are quiet.
Yeah. I have chickens. I thought about going out for chickens. Then I probably stayed too on theme, and I asked my 9-year-old daughter what her advice would be for us adults about keeping work fun. So here was her response. And this is really actually I didn't ask her this, but she's really astutely really giving advice to the bosses, the managers out there of how to make work fun. And I apologize for all. I realize in this recording she really uses the word like a lot, and I don't. Maybe in this interview I've been a heavy like user, and it's either her using like is either my fault or me using like too much is maybe her fault if I'm going to blame my 9-year-old. But here we go. Here's the sound effects for this episode.
Like lots of the whole the whole company the whole school giving. So in the they could have 2 or 3 breaks during the day to do whatever they want, and they could go home and have lunch and be with their family.
Yeah, so there we go. More breaks, give people freedom to play and do what they want.
Yeah,
more time with their family. I think that's a great way to make
of
work.
a 9-year-old. Yeah, likes and I'm all good with it. I know I do my fair share. I occasionally will edit out. So if either of us have some here, I may edit a few out to clean things up, but I won't touch that recording because that was perfect as is. So last question I always ask is where can people learn more about you or the work you're doing with Jane?
Yeah. So people, as a recruiter, somebody in talent acquisition, better or worse, a lot of my social stuff is on LinkedIn. So definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. It's because I have a semi-unique-ish name. It's just my LinkedIn is just Everett Reiss. So it's just linkedin.com/in/Everett Reiss. Or you can also find out about the work that we're doing at Jane JANE.HR.
Awesome. Well, I'll put that in the show notes as well. Everett, thank you. This was a really fun conversation and enlightening too, to really understand that it is actually possible to make the hiring process, kind of enjoyable and fun and fruitful as opposed to the frustrating and off-putting experience that I'm sure most of the listeners have experienced at least at some time.
Yeah. Oh, thanks so much, Tita. This was a blast. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Thanks, Everett. Bye-bye.
All right. Take care.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in to the Desuckify Work podcast. And a huge thanks to Everett for bringing a fresh take on hiring to the show. You can follow Everett on LinkedIn and check out Jane's site at jane.hr. If you enjoyed the conversation and would like to help your teams bring their absolute best to work, I invite you to schedule a free half-hour discovery session. Type meow in the calendar invite, and I'll also send you a free Desuckify Work t-shirt. Bye, everyone.